A very warm welcome to all of the audience here, as well as our special guest, Associate Prof. Dr. Nur Azah. Thank you so much for joining us today, Doctor.
My pleasure. Thank you, Joel.
All right, so today, yes, thank you, Dr. Nur Azah. So today, Dr. Nur Azah will be gracing us with her presence, as well as her insights on a very interesting topic called the importance of rehabilitation engineering. But before we dive into the topic, I think it's only right we give Dr. Nur Azah a proper introduction so that the audience is well aware.
Okay.
So Dr. Nur Azah is an associate professor at University of Malaya. She also holds a bachelor in mechatronics engineering with first class honors in 2005, and then continued to pursue her PhD in rehabilitation engineering in the University of Sydney, Australia, in the same year as well. So although her background is hard engineering, her interest is actually applying the knowledge gained from mechatronics engineering into medical rehabilitation. So, and this actually brought her to undertake clinical and biomechanics researches. And her PhD project as well was her developing a novel isokinetic FES leg stepping trainer, and this was targeted to individuals with a spinal cord injury. She also investigated the effects of its use by paraplegics in the rehabilitation gym in the University of Sydney during her training sessions. As of now, she is a biomedical engineering department, so she's in the department in UM and has been there since 2010. And she pioneers the biomechatronics, neuroprosthetics, and functional electrical stimulation, also known as FAS research group in Malaysia. In her second year of service in UM, she was the coordinator of Bachelor in Biomedical Engineering, which involves prosthetics as well as orthotics. And this was actually the first degree program which aimed to produce prosthetics and orthotics engineers in Malaysia. So we're very honored to have you here today, Dr. Nur Azah, to speak on rehabilitation engineering.
Thank you.
All right, so I think we can, yeah, sure, Doctor. So I think we can jump right into the topic. And so, Doctor, can you please tell us what is rehabilitation in general, and what are the types of rehabilitations that are currently available?
Okay. So rehabilitation by itself, in a medical term, is when you have services where you help people with injury or disability to be able to regain their function or improve their health or fitness. Yeah. So basically, in the medical sense, if you're talking to medical students and the medical practitioners, it's the rehab medicine department. So in PPUM, we have the Menara Selatan. So we have the physiotherapy, the occupational therapy. Those are majorly the ones and the physicians who are involved in patient rehabilitation in terms of medical lah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. So I think we are all aware of what rehabilitation is, and we are also aware of what engineers are. But here we are talking about a new term called rehabilitation engineering.
Yeah.
So I think it would be good if we got it from you yourself as to what actually is rehabilitation engineering.
Okay. Rehabilitation engineering is when you use, or we use, physics or rehabilitation principles or engineering principles, in order to address the needs of people with disabilities or people who has injuries. That is particularly true when we deal with assistive devices, when we deal with prosthetic legs or rehab setting, where in the hospital, clinically you will reach a limit in order for you to help the patient. So in rehab medicine is where the engineers can play an in-person role in order to help the patients, either by designing a device or making a small adaptation, or using other engineering disciplines or technology in order to address or come up with a solution. Come up with a diagnosis in an engineering way, in order for the patient to get their benefit. So that benefit can be as simple as having their day-to-day activity being assisted, such as wheelchair or walking stick, walking aid, and things like that, or a more advanced level like the one I'm working on, functional electrical stimulation, where you have electrical stimulation so-called injected into the muscle, the body, so that the muscle itself, if they are paralyzed, you can activate them and they can exercise. Because otherwise, they won't be able to exercise. Otherwise they won't be able to walk. So you need all this technology, engineering principles, and knowledge and specialization in order for that to happen. In the end, it's the patient goal. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. I guess rehabilitation engineers must work closely with the doctors as well, because I remember in my first year of medical school, there was this orthopedic surgeon who had a very close friend who was a mechatronics engineer, and they actually managed to come up with a device. I think they developed on the Ilizarov method. I'm not so sure if you've heard of it. Yeah. Yes. So in order to actually help the broken bone. So yeah, I think that was pretty good as well. Yeah. So Doctor, as somebody who wants to go into rehabilitation engineering, what would be their job scope like? How broad it is, and can someone just follow their passion and interest? Yeah.
Okay. There is no, in Malaysia at least, there is no specific role that defines someone to be a rehabilitation engineer. Okay, so like you do have electrical engineer, you do have civil engineer, you do have biomedical engineer in the hospitals, but the biomedical engineers, the ones that we know of in the hospital, are the ones who take care of the equipments of the hospital setting. The ones that on the side of the bed, you have all these machines, maybe the diagnostic devices like MRI, CT scan, X-ray. So the biomedical engineers, when you look at it from the hospital job scope perspective, they are the ones who deal with the equipments, maintaining, troubleshooting, maybe involved in some design of the device. But when we talk about rehabilitation engineer, rehab engineer we call them, you mentioned the program that I was the coordinator, right? The prosthetics and orthotics. So biomedical engineer bracket prosthetic orthotics. So these are the first batch of students who when they do the training, the biomedical engineering training, they learn about human a little bit more than the rest of their biomedical engineering counterparts, students. So they learn more about the human anatomy, gait function, pathological conditions. So they know a bit more about the human itself, because in the end, rehab engineers, they not necessarily deal with the equipments, but they deal with the patient or the user, or the one who is receiving the solution. So if you say what's the job scope, it's quite broad. If you say people with disability, there's a large range. Even Jabatan Kebajikan Masyarakat has 7 categories: penglihatan, telinga, physical, cognitive, pembelajaran, what else? And then the last one, number 7, is multiple disabilities. So multiple disabilities means maybe someone who is aged, who is aging, elderly, they have problem with the eye, at the same time they have problem with the physical disabilities. So it's quite broad, I must say, and perhaps because of that we don't have a clear job scope yet, and because traditionally the domain is a medical domain, so people still pass the responsibility back to the doctors, the physicians, or the physiotherapists who wants to exercise them and regain their muscle strength and motor function, or maybe the occupational therapists. So because traditionally it's a medical field where the engineers come in as another those engineers, the rehab engineers, will not be able to work by him or herself. They need to be functioning in a group with the medical team. So I think at least in our country, there are progress towards defining the role of a rehab engineer and who are rehab engineers, what are their job scope. But until now, I guess it's still iffy unless we go to prosthetic orthotics. And it's quite clear it's pakar prosthetic orthotic. So the ones who are involved with the technical bit, doing the casting, doing the leg itself or the hand itself or the orthosis itself. So that side of the specialization in terms of rehab engineering, that's a little bit clearer, relatively clearer than the rest. The rest more on prescription. Who gives out the prescription? Doctors can. So doctors need to be working very closely with us rehab engineers in order for the patient to be able to get that benefit. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Doctor. Just to build up on that question. So you mentioned it's so broad and there's not like a very clear pathway or job scope. So would you agree that it's, as a rehab engineer, it's very much goal driven? If you want to work towards something, for example, you want to help people with spinal cord injuries, and then you can on your own independently work towards that alongside doctors.
Yep, you can if you have the financial capacity and freedom to maybe build your own company. Yes, you can get into that. I do have students who take charge of their own destiny, if you want to put it that way. They create their own company and and have their own solution and offer that as part of the service. We do have students who ex-students who go into that path. If you are less financially able, perhaps you need to tag on to an existing role where you can serve as part of an existing perjawatan, if I may put it that way. The perjawatan has to be there so that you have latihan, you have proper latihan, the salary, things. You need to secure yourself as a person who wants to build a career, build a family. You need that part of the equation to be settled. So when the condition is on your side in terms of job security and clarity of role, then it's okay. Then perhaps you can tweak a bit what discipline you want to move into, or you can go into research. And as a researcher, you can discuss with your supervisor and what field you want to build evidence on or in. You want to build evidence in child CP, cerebral palsy rehabilitation of CP, kids with CP. So perhaps that can build your career or your track record. And at the end of the day, someone will pick you up based on what you have created of your track record, or they will create something special for you in order to proceed in that direction. So that's the beauty of this field. It's new. You're not dictated by it should be like this or you have to have this. To a certain extent, it's developing. But I like to be more opportunistic about it because it's not established yet. There is room for us to create our own future and lead our own pathway, so that because we know what's best, but because maybe the system is not ready, or there is no, and for someone to offer a job, they need to understand what it entails, what does it take, how much should I pay you, where do you fit, and things like that. So that's the thing about rehabilitation engineering, at least in here. But overseas, some are still like us. In some places, it's more established. So it depends how ready you are and what are you willing to go through with in order to get that done, to achieve that end goal of that whole thing. Yeah.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. Yes, I guess the freedom is quite freeing in a way where you can still do whatever you want. Yeah, but I think the awareness also needs to be there so that, you know, you can more easily find your place. And I hope maybe this podcast would help in that sense to increase more awareness in terms of what rehab engineers do. So now going over to the technical side a bit, in terms of actually designing or creating a rehab technology, what are some factors that rehab engineers look for in terms of ensuring a better quality of life for the patient?
Okay. Number one, that is a very good question. Number one, the engineer has to understand the patient as much as the doctor understands the patient. I do have friends who are engineers who work in Faculty of Engineering only, maybe not in only throughout, because we have many faculties of engineering throughout Malaysia. And the way they understand the patients are by reading about them, not actually, understanding them as what they should be. So that puts a limitation in order of how much success can be achieved at the end. We have to understand, rehab engineer is supposed to help the doctors and the medical team to get the patient to be at the best state possible, health-wise, of course. And sometimes, or most of the times, engineer will do the designing and the technical part, but they lost touch of how it should be. So they come up with something first, they come up with something and then they show, macam ni boleh tak? Does it work for you? And then the doctor will say, jauh lagi ni dengan wayar berselirat, so that gap has to be from the beginning as an engineer to another engineer, if there's an engineer out there listening. You want to make that communication positive. So you don't want to give a bad first impression. If your first impression is, a bulky thing and then jauh dari what the doctors expected. So the doctors will say, thank you, but sometimes we are very polite that we don't say betulkan yang ni. So we just say, okay, yeah, thank you, and then we just keep quiet. So that's a very Asian way of, very respectful. You don't want to hurt people's feeling. So that doesn't help in the two-way communication. We need to have that two-way communication. My training, you mentioned my training was in mechatronics engineering. My first degree is pure engineering. I didn't take biology. I took biology only during my SPM, and then my engineering was fully no biology at all. So when I did my PhD in the research center for people with paralysis, spinal cord injury, I get to help them transfer from the wheelchair to the plinth for them to exercise, put on the electrodes. And then during lunchtime, I talk to them, eat with them, have lunch with them, accompany them to their cars. And then sometimes they invite me to Christmas party, birthday parties of their family, go to their houses, things like that. So you get to be friends with them and you really understand where they are coming from. So you get to get the unwritten part of their condition. Okay, sometimes they get spasm and sometimes they fart, accidentally fart in front of you, and then oh sorry Azah, I just had wind, it's okay, so things like that you don't get by just reading on a textbook or journal papers. So that part really made me understand them well enough, and there's not just one or two of them, there are many of them that your study participants becomes your friends, and then they volunteer for more of your research. So that bit of it you can't get from written text by just reading somewhere. You need to be in it, so if there is a chance for you to be involved in a more hospital clinical setting, by all means, we hope the doctors are very welcoming of us engineers to be in that together. We all come from good intention, but sometimes our way doesn't match. We speak a different lingo, you speak a different lingo. If we don't understand each other, it's like itik cakap dengan ayam, you don't get that smooth communication. And because we're too polite to talk, to address it, really, then the miscommunication may happen, and then you may just not invite the engineer anymore, or you may not continue working with the doctor anymore, just because you don't fix the communication problem. So that's number one. If you ask what's the most important factor. Secondly is willingness to try things out. I'm very fortunate to have good friends who are medical rehab physicians who are open and willing to hear my suggestions and my so they don't too technical, don't want to talk to you anymore. They are very open, and so again is the two-way communication that we try to understand each other's point of view, because in the end it's the patients who are going to benefit from it. The rest are like cost, funding, time, resources, ability to patent or not to patent it, copywriting, the commercialization commercialization potential and pathway. The rest will fall into place if you have firstly, I think, good connection or good friendship between the doctors and the rehab engineers. I think that would be the main factor that will get.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. Yeah, I think I agree with that as well. Understanding the patient is very important, and it's good to put yourselves in the patient's shoes, because I think many a times two patients with the exact same condition can come to you, and the treatment can be totally different because of what they prefer. So yeah, I think understanding is very important. And yeah, I also like the fact that you talked about the critical approach, where don't be afraid to give criticisms, because only then we can grow. When you're too polite sometimes, then you end up missing out improving the other person. Yeah, so I think, yeah, thank you so much for that, Doctor. And I think it was nice to hear your experience as well during your research. I'm pretty sure we will listen to more of that later on. So Doctor, continuing on the line of technology and devices, I'm sure there are a lot, but what type of assistive devices have been developed so far through rehab technology?
Okay. In general, globally there's a big range of devices. So we can talk about wheelchairs, walking aids, prosthetics, orthotics like AFOs and exoskeleton, things like that. There's also, these are more physical disability oriented. So there's also like pain management. So pain management, the TENS thing, it's also part of rehab. Technology comes from rehab, where you use electrical impulses to reduce pain. So this was developed, if I'm not mistaken, many years ago, somewhere in Europe, and I've been to their lab, and it's well established now. It becomes a commercial product, and it becomes part of what doctor can order, e-procurement, and get purchase. So it does not look like an engineering product anymore, because it can simply be procured commercially. So that's one of the example of a successful rehab device. Others may involve, the new ones may involve the brain control interface, like you have a BCI, and then someone plays with a game using virtual reality. So these are more not new, but gaining place more in a place like PPUM. We have a VR room in PPUM rehab medicine. Is it level 11 or level 10? We have a VR room, so patient can try out. Rehabilitation robotics now. We have do you know we have a clinic? We just launched the clinic. Create, we call it. Clinic for Rehabilitation Engineering and Assistive Technology, if I'm not mistaken, the long name. Create. And I'm one of the consultants. So as an engineer, I'm a consultant for that clinic together with a medical doctor to see patient and somehow make some prescription or suggestion. Yeah. So I think that's the way forward. That we can say, okay, use this Tibion leg, or use this M2 device, rehab robotic device in the hospital as part of your, instead of medicine or nutrition and exercise, you can have technology as also part of the prescription. So I guess that's the way forward, but there are also things like retinal implant, cochlear is another example, a really good example of medical device or rehab device that has established, and now people just, you can just order, and lots and lots of good testimonials about it. It started as a rehab engineering research, then it became established. You have a lot of commercial product development goes into it, and now it's like a household item now. Cochlear implant. It's a lot of my colleagues in Australia, when I did my PhD training in Australia, they are now with Cochlear. They have a good really established institution there. So the ones that we could not really touch or could not really address are the cognitive ones or learning disabilities, perhaps a little less obvious. But for that also, I'm working as a rehab engineer. I'm working with children with autism, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, where we apply learning technological learning tools for them to learn, to address their learning. So that's also kind of a rehab engineering, but on the softer side, because you don't really put things on their body, but you can also address it by not touching them, if I may put it that way. So there are plenty. WHO has produced a guideline on most popular assistive devices. I think it was in, if I'm not mistaken, 2016, 2017. They publish world's most used assistive devices, and they did a large survey and what's most used and things like that. So even adapter for you to hold a fork, for you to eat, or an adapted cup, that's also rehab engineering, actually, because it's engineering design. Many.
Thank you so much for that, Doctor. I think as you were explaining, all of these images started coming in my mind. So the fork, the cochlear implant, and all that. So I guess there is really a wide range of things that rehab engineers has to offer. But I think one more thing that I like is that you mentioned about the Create clinic, where you are also there alongside the doctor. So I guess rehab engineers cannot be seen as those who make things for patients, but it also must be seen where you guys can also offer your input and products of knowledge in your head straight, so in order to better the outcome of the patient. And it's great to see you working with the autistic children as well. I think we just had the World Autism Day a few days ago, I think.
Yes. So, this month.
So I think that's nice, because the brain is truly an unknown frontier, so it's another challenging bit to actually discuss how these disabilities come from. So Doctor, moving forward, what could we expect from rehabilitation engineers in the future, in terms of not only their devices, but their input? And perhaps a better way to phrase the question is, what is the vision that you see for rehab engineers in the future?
I wish someone could have a child, now maybe a school goer, they could put in their karangan sekolah, cita-cita jurutera rehabilitasi or rehab engineer. I wish it is not at that stage yet. They can only write doctor, engineer, or maybe nurse, maybe physio, OT pun diorang tak berapa, it's not well known to them. So apakan lagi rehab engineer, So my dream is for at least our country to have our kids dream about being a rehab engineer and write that in their karangan. If I'm 60 or 70 years old later, someone comes to me and, Doctor, see my daughter write this, I'll be very happy. I think I'll be crying. Because when I started going into this field, I know, because I'm an engineer, I was trained as an engineer, but I know deep in my heart I want to help people who are disabled. So, but I remember my mother said, tak ada, jawatan tu tak ada, dia kata. So I was so frustrated that so how am I going? So I did my intern in Proton, and it didn't give me such fulfillment. And the way our community is I don't know, planned. Okay, so if you are a science student, this is the job. If you are, a science student, you choose either medic or engineering. If you're an engineer, this is your job. It's very industry oriented. I understand where it comes from. It comes from the necessity for you to make a living. Yeah. So if the job scope is not there, then there is no title for that job. They may not be job security in that line for people to pursue that field. So my dream, my ultimate dream is for the role of rehab engineer to be like household name. Okay, I'm a rehab engineer. People know. People don't say, what? I had a friend who's a prosthetist. I'm a prosthetist, and then people say, what? With the face, what? That kind of thing. So we hope that our country is moving forward in that direction, that health institutions, especially like hospitals, like PPM is in the right direction because they have that clinic, rehab clinic, the Create clinic, where engineers have a role in seeing patient and getting, so that the message is not lost in translation. We are not just in the storeroom developing something and then pass it on to someone, and then when you pass things down, it depends on you, on who you pass it to. If you pass it down to a businessman, the businessman will put a business perspective on it. So the thing with rehab engineering or rehabilitation field is you don't get a mess. Like if you're doing a baby clothes, if you're in a clothing industry, you have a mess. So for one simple design, the return of investment is large because you can sell it to many people. But when in rehab, it's very specialized. Each person has different needs. And if you want to mass it out, you can't. It's really hard to get the ROI. So from a business perspective, it has to be more strategic than that. For example, when I create my function, so I build my own FES device. But then when it comes to pre-commercialization and commercialization, people will ask, so who can use this? People with spinal cord injury. Okay, how many of people with spinal cord injury in Malaysia who will buy this? Let's start asking that question. Can we extend this to sports? So then the business mindset comes into play. So it distracts you from actually doing it for the patient because you want to get that business return. So that's another perspective that I think people don't realize, but good to put it out there for people to think about it. And someone like like a big businessman who wants to invest, they understand that the investment is in that nature. Yeah, I think those are my top two wishes.
All right, thank you so much for that, Doctor. I actually have a younger sister who's 10 now, so I'll pass on a message to her to try and become a rehab engineer in her BM Karangan. Yeah, but also, I really commend you, Doctor. I think you are a prime example of if you want to help someone, then no matter what you are, you can always help them. So, yeah, thank you. That was very inspiring, Doctor.
Thank you.
So, Doctor, now we flipping this and going and looking at the patient side. So as a patient who is coming into the clinic and maybe expecting for a rehab device, so what should the patient expect?
Okay, good question. When we look at from the patient side, we have, to some extent, we have some misconception. Oh, if I do technical things, I'll get better 10 times better than the normal physio. So that's the first thing that we should address or advise with the patient. This is just another way of us trying to get there, or your better health. Okay, because we can't get it by medication. We are limited in terms of nutrition. We are limited in terms of exercise, physical activity, so you may need this technology. But it won't promise you that you will get better. Like FES, when I started working with my FES, my father will ask, so orang tu boleh jalan terus ke? Tak, no, it's not like that. No. So that's the first one, expectation by the patient. Second, as how engineers speak to doctors, patient needs to speak to us. You need to tell us if it doesn't fit you. You have to tell us how we can make it better. Okay. Sometimes they come to the clinic, they get the prescription, let's say they get a new AFO. We have done the casting all nicely. Okay, give it to the patient, and then patient pun bawa balik rumah. Next visit, they come in a wheelchair. The AFO is on the side. Okay, so we get this a lot. Even prosthetically, we have done all the casting, because your body condition changes over time. When we did our first assessment, especially in a government setting, the time between one visit to another is quite large. Yeah, the duration is quite large. So your body may change within that duration. So when we come up with a device that we think it will fit you based on our assessment 4 weeks ago, or maybe 6 weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, when you actually wear it, it may not fit. Even though we've tried our best to make it fit based on our assessment. So this is the bit that patients don't feel shy, don't be too polite in telling us, oh, dah tak sedap pakai lah, dah longgar lah. You have to tell us. These are the things. So I've addressed the expectation, number 1. Communication. If it doesn't work, please let us know so that we can fix it. There may be implication in terms of insurance, maybe kena bayar baru, or but don't make that a hindrance of not getting your voice out to us. And then we need patients to be active user. So if you have the device, please use it, because even SOXO or Perkeso, SOXO, they have this it's like insurance, right? The coverage. They even them, they have the return to work policy right now, return to work initiative. So they don't want OKUs to stay as OKU. They want OKUs or people with disabilities to go out and earn a living, or at least go out there and be part of the society and function. So from there, this is where the success of a cochlear implant, the hearing aid or hearing device, the role of prosthetic devices like artificial leg, kaki palsu, hand, artificial hand. These are where those devices will be a self-proof of how successful you can be as a human being and live your life. Assistive devices that has to do with bladder or erectile dysfunction, when you spinal cord injury and things like that. When you have a family, you are able to have kids and things like that, especially the men lah. So those are testimony of how a good collaboration between the health facility and the technical people, such as the engineer, rehab engineer like us, and support services like SOXO or whatever insurance that you are on, the coverage that you have. All those will play a role in order to make your life better. So you, if my own family member, my mom-in-law had a stroke, the really severe one that you can't wake up, you can't, someone has to carry you, and major stroke. So it's a major stroke. It was close to Hari Raya, and one of my invention is a device that could help stroke people to speak by pressing button, not to speak from their mouth, but to express what they need. It was still a bench version, a lab version. I brought it over to my mom-in-law's house and asked her to use it. Of course, she is too weak to use it. But told the family member, my sister-in-law, my brother-in-law, the whole we didn't have any helper at the time. Even my own daughters, exercise, Atama, we call them Atama. My mother-in-law is from India. Atama, exercise, 1, 2, 3. So the whole family keeps taking turn. Even though we know that, if we don't understand the importance of early activation for recovery, active, you don't just do passive stretching, you do active stretching. So these are all physio knowledge that I pick up as a rehab engineer. So it's not just the engineering knowledge, the medical knowledge, and also the physio OT knowledge that we blend in. And when you get a situation, this is what's supposed to be done. And it comes from a daughter-in-law who has a training in rehab engineering. Somehow it has weight. And Alhamdulillah, right now my mother-in-law is walking by herself, feeding herself, just that one hand is weak. So early intervention, communication, expectation, and the rest, family support, willingness to the patient themselves has to be willing to better themselves and get better. So I think that's the bit that I would say from the patient's perspective.
All right, thank you for sharing that, Doctor. And I think it's also very uplifting to know that you've managed to create a device which ultimately helped in the recovery of someone close to you. So yeah, that's great. So Doctor, I think one thing you mentioned earlier is that in terms of rehab engineers, when we design something for a patient, it's very much patient-centered. So to be able to mass produce that is going to be difficult. And then when you look at the ROIs and all, so it's not so feasible in the financial aspect. So I just wanted to know, since there's so many forms of rehabilitation, so what are the limitations, you would say, of a technology when it's actually made by various rehab engineers? So you have so many different engineers making so many things, which are very much patient-centered. So do you see any limitations in that sense? And also a follow-up question would be, since when we think about rehab, we tend to think of a patient going to the clinic, spending time with the physiotherapists, learning to walk and all that. So there is also that human element in it. So do you think rehab engineers with their technology can sort of replace the human factor? And if so, how?
Okay. My first answer to that is no. You can't replace technology. You can't replace the human by technology. Technology will always be a supporting watak sampingan, a supporting role. You will always have the human part. Of course, you can make the technology as user-friendly as possible, as humanized as possible, but it will never replace human touch. So that's my first instinct of when you ask me that. The first part of your question was of so many types of engineers. There's no strict way of saying only this type of engineer can help. If you are a mechanical engineering background, if you have a mechanical engineering background, you can still help. If you're an electrical engineering background, you can still help. Mechanical engineers may be dealing with motors. So maybe you want to work in motorized wheelchair. Maybe you want to help in terms of power consumption of gearing of a certain. A lot of innovations are done. For example, wheelchair. You know how wheelchairs nowadays, it can be folded just by lifting the middle part of the seat, and then the wheelchair can become one. You lipat the wheelchair, we call it. That was created by someone who has a good friend who is a disabled person or wheelchair user. So in essence, if you have the understanding of the human need, you will be able to come up with a good solution. And because we are so connected now, myself, I'm a mechatronics engineer. I may not know every inch of detail of every field of engineering, but I know who to talk to. I know certain amount of knowledge that I can gauge and latch on to their knowledge so that we can have that conversation better. So it's about knowing the basics, some form of basic, and then be able to express and articulate what you need and what you can brainstorm with the other party who may not be as, maybe they are very good, excellent technical engineer, but they are not used to working with human or patient, so they may be scared of that, you know, patient, oh tak apa, aku buat kereta je, dia kata. Oh no, patients, no, I'm into wireless, you know. So if we have that ability to convince them and express, okay, in terms of wireless, can we do this? I have this case, can we try to match it? Okay, so it's that skill. In the end, it's the human skill juga. As an engineer, we are human. We have that communication ability. We have to use that to get into someone, another engineers who may, because I know some engineers, they are very afraid of human. Human ethics, dia dengar ethics je, dia dah macam, nanti kena buat ethics, tak payahlah buat patient ni, buat simulation je lah. So they are comfortable doing computer simulation. And you know, when it comes to computer simulation, unless it's really inside your body, you can't, you know, like heart or lung, you can't really get in there. Yes, you do simulation, but if you have physical disability, so you may want to go into experiment and see what actually happens, because it's much more than maths. It's much more than mathematics and modeling and simulation. It's seeing it firsthand and understanding, so there is the tendency for this muscle to be contracted more, this, you know, imbalance or whatever that you won't be able to recognize by doing technical simulation and you know, lab studies. So yeah, I think that's a thing.
All right, thanks, Prof. Yeah, so I guess you can say when great minds all come together and, you know, share their own information from their areas of expertise, then I think greater things can always be produced for the benefit of everyone. Yeah. So Doctor, now I think we come to quite an interesting question. So are there enough rehabilitation engineers in Malaysia? Okay, so I already got your answer. So what do you think can be done to improve this?
Okay. If we can get the hospitals to open a role, maybe every hospital has to have a rehab engineer. Let's start with that. Okay, so the JPA, the ones who buat lantikan though. Of course, the private hospital, they can do that, but usually private hospital, they will refer what the government hospital do. Government hospital pula, they will see what perjawatan yang JPA akan bagi, you know, that for a jawatan to be there, there's a commitment of salary for throughout that person's lifetime. So it's more complicated than what we think it is, because it addresses a larger issue of funding and long-term financial investment in terms of, so if we are able to address that in the government hospital setting, let's say we make it compulsory for every hospital to have a rehab engineer in-house in the hospital, so that will make room for rehab engineers to, you know, to be there, and then the private institution will follow. They will you know, take it up, and they won't outsource it. The things, people use short-term solution. If we can outsource it and commit for a year, why do we need to commit for 50 years? So they will commit for service, by service, not by, you know, by a person as a jawatan. So I think that can help. Maybe the clinic that we have, the one I mentioned, the Create Rehabilitation Robotics, and I can't remember the full name, but that clinic where engineers come in and become one of the consultants, that can be like a living lab for people to learn from and maybe adopt one way or another. Things, when we start things, we shouldn't be afraid of things failing, because things will fail somehow. Only the degree of failure and your willingness to get back up, you know. So there's no perfect condition where everything is going to be smooth sailing from the beginning. So I think if our society has that courage, has that willingness, I think a lot of people now, we have quite an amount of portion of the population who can afford to explore things without worrying too much about salary and you know, masa depan and things like that. So I think if we can speak up, reach this population where they don't mind, you know, they don't mind doing this even with small salary, because they know it's a new thing. Because it can't be too business oriented. It's not in the beginning it will be hard for it to be a money making. In the long run, maybe yes. Like if you become cochlear, you know, in the beginning it may be still GGG, but once you reach there, but it's a milestone lah. So if you have more people who are willing to get into this without worrying of the, you know, the fundamentals, the basic, and just put the passion into it and try it out. Be brave enough to try it out and just put yourself out there. Doctors and medical practitioners, rehab, physios, OTs are willing to work with engineers. Don't see us as an outsider. See us as part of you, part of the family. We're a new part of the family. So then I think we'll be moving forward very quickly in this direction.
All right, thanks, Doctor. Yeah, so I guess availability of rehab engineers in every hospital, I think that would greatly benefit, because if you never had a rehab engineer in a hospital, then you would never know the benefits that they could bring as well to the patients. Yeah. So, Doctor, I think now maybe since you have a lot of experience in terms of research and actually innovating new technologies, maybe we could spend some time to listen to you share any personal or interesting experiences that you've gone through in terms of rehabilitation engineering.
Well, there's lots of stories. I don't know which one to pick up. One did I mention about my mother-in-law?
Yeah.
It's not so much the device, because the device was just sitting there on the table. She didn't use it, but the so-called advice that I say, don't let her be lying down doing nothing for a long time. You know, my family members, they took leave and they just keep doing, and you know, active, asking my mummy-in-law to, you know, lagi ya Tama, lagi 3, 4, 5. Okay, so the active rewiring of the brain actually happened, and you know, the family support, that's one. In terms of FES, I think I made good friends from that research. We have had I think total of 5 spinal injured patients. That's a complete patients, yeah. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to stand, but we made them stand using the FES in the hospital and in our lab in engineering. So of course there's the body harness and all the setups, safety lah. But they were standing with their own muscle in the hospital, and one patient had their wife to come along. Every time the wife will come along, and the wife will take picture, like so excited. And one of them will be, hey, look how tall I am. I've been looking at you guys, dongak, you know. But when I stand, look, I'm looking down on you. See how tall I am. You know, this kind of thing. It's a really heartwarming. I know it's not much, but for them, it's a lot. For them to be able to stand up, for having been wheelchair bound for many years, and they will ask, bila lagi Azah nak stand? Bila lagi nak stand? They keep asking me that. And of course, my kekangan would be, my limitation would be the financial, the grant, you know, the all those resources lah. But of course, I think I'm very happy with what I have been involved in, especially in terms of functional electrical stimulation, where Now in the hospital, we have bicycle that is dedicated for FES. So patient, they come in as part of their physio session. They sit on the bicycle, put electrode, and they will get current into their muscle. And this, it won't make them, if they're complete injury, they're complete injury lah. You cannot reverse that. If they're incomplete, maybe there is possibility. But if they're complete injury, it's more to build their muscle mass, their blood pumping. You know, when you cycle, the actually, otherwise they will cycle with their own. The only body part that they can control is their upper body, kan? So they will use their hand. So imagine the blood circulation will only be on the top side of the body. Bawah ni still tidur. So if you put FES and you put electrical stimulation on even the shank, the lower leg, so that blood pumping will create that whole. So they will end up, you know, pink and flush and maybe peluh-peluh. So those are the things that I'm quite happy that it has gone and established, especially the clinic where, you know, my first time seeing patient as an engineer is like surreal. It's just so surreal. I was so proud of it. I told my husband, abang nak tahu tak hari ni I jumpa patient as a doctor, you know. I was so happy about that. So yeah, I think if you can have more of that, and people will start talking about it, they will ask for a rehab engineer. I want a rehab engineer. So then you know the ripple effect will happen. But we have to start somewhere. We have to inspire. We have to get people above with lots of money to know about us and willing to invest in us. Things like that lah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences, Doctor. I look forward to see your future work and maybe work alongside you one day as well in order to improve outcomes of patients. So, Doctor, as a closer, what would be your aspirations or goals or perhaps vision for rehab engineering in the future, or maybe any other goals that you have in mind?
I hope that Malaysia can be play a role as an example to countries around us. We become a referral center of how rehab engineers should look like, and people learn if like Vietnam or Indonesia, they want to do rehab robotics, for example. They come to us to refer. We have already in Europe, in the US, maybe in India, here and there, in China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, but in our region, still a lot can be done. So I believe Malaysia as a country and rehab engineering field, I have students, many students who I hope will carry through the legacy and make their own legacy, of course. But we have to realize that we are at par with the Europeans and the US. We are at par, and we should strive to be in the global playing field. So whatever is new adopted over there, we are also doing it, and we are even creating new techniques or new protocols or new invention that the Europeans will follow, or the US people will follow us. So that's my bigger aspiration, so that in the end everything will be cost effective. If a lot of demand, it's supply and demand. Business, talking about business, is supply and demand. It's a lot of supply, there will be a lot of demand from the ground, there will be supply, and the price will be cheaper. So that's how I think we can address the non-cost effectiveness of this field right now that we are looking at. But in the long run, if we are aware of this, and we have we are moving towards making it like a big impact and everyone wants it, and then I think technology will be not as expensive, personalization will not be as expensive. There may be other solution like incorporating VR or incorporating telemedicine, which is not expensive, that can also reach the goal. So it can be accessible to everyone. I hope me and you, Joel, at the end when we are older, this is not an issue for us. We can just order, I want a rehab robot at home. You can just order. I hope maybe it will happen, maybe it won't, but it depends on how fast we are moving within this duration. So I hope, that's my hope, my aspiration.
All right, thank you so much, Doctor. It's very insightful to hear that. So I guess as a closer to all of our audiences watching, do you have any last pieces of parting advice that you'd like to give us?
Okay. My biggest advice is for us all to work together, regardless of our field, regardless of our position, regardless of our qualification. We are all human beings. We are one human being trying to help another human being. So we all have our strengths, our experience. So we put aside differences that we may have, whatever level of discrimination that we may have. And if we're able to see past through that, I think we can do so much, and we can achieve just so much. In the end, if not us, our own family member, our own generation will benefit from it. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. It's a very, very wholesome advice, and I hope all of our audiences actually take it to heart.